No deal, no problem, no money. We save 39 billion, we spend it back in the UK.
No-Deal Brexit is genuinely a very bad outcome and should be avoided almost at all costs.
It isn't really a no-deal option at all. It's a misnomer. It's a multi-deal option.
I have said we have looked into the abyss when we have looked at no deal. For British farmers, it is a complete catastrophe to leave the EU with no deal.
At the moment, I guess nobody can really define how a no-deal Brexit is going to look like.
You must be the only businessman that is advocating a no deal, just leaving. All other businessmen seem to think that that would equal chaos.
The forces of the establishment would say it's controversial, but I think it's common sense.
We import 40% of our food in this country, and that isn't finished goods, it's ingredients. Choice will be eroded, and some of the brands and foods that people have grown to love will not be available or will be much more expensive. I think it could be very grisly, actually, in the weeks before a hard Brexit, and in the immediate aftermath. It could be very, very unfortunate.
Oh, come on. Let's be clear. We all know in business that no deal is better than a bad deal. And this deal by the Prime Minister...
Is that really true, though?
Of course it's true. Of course it's true. Every business person knows that. And this is the worst deal ever in history, to pay £39 billion for nothing guaranteed in return. Let's remember, just over the weekend, 200 British entrepreneurs representing 45,000 staff, over £2 billion of sales, wrote to the newspapers confirming that actually we would be better to refuse this deal. I think the business community is as split as the general population. I think it's really important to remember 90% of British businesses don't export.
If we applied WTO tariffs to our current mix of imported products, you'd be looking at a 14% increase in cost on those products that we import.
And who's going to pay for that?
That pain will be spread across everybody, I think. So the manufacturers will bear some, we will bear some, our customers will probably have to bear some, but ultimately the consumer will see that reflected in higher prices.
Just because we don't sign this particular deal doesn't mean to say we won't have any deal. Both sides have got a strong self-interest in having free trade between our two economic areas, and that's what we should be setting about doing as and when we know that we're out. And then, of course, there are all the agreements and deals to be signed with countries all around the world. Free trade agreements from America, perhaps that'll be the first, all the way down. This is a multi-deal option. It isn't a no-deal option.
Now, if you calculate according to WTO, then it's quite clear. The elements are open and everybody can do the math. And just for Jaguar Land Rover, it would mean that we wipe out 1.2 billion annually from our profit. And that's money we eagerly need to invest in the future, to invest in better solutions for the environment, but also for the people.
But what would that mean then for your investment levels in terms of numbers? What would it mean?
There's no investment anymore, there's no research anymore, because at the end of the day, with this kind of burden, there's no liquidity anymore.
So if there's no investment, are you saying you would have to, for example, move production out of the UK?
That might be one of the consequences, but it quite clear has to be prepared very, very quickly.
Of course, it is not possible to pick up and move our large UK factories to other parts of the world immediately. However, aerospace is a long-term business, and we could be forced to redirect future investments in the event of a no-deal Brexit. And make no mistakes, there are plenty of countries out there who would love to build the wings for Airbus aircraft.
I think as a country we'll do much better if we don't sign a deal with the EU. The great danger to us now, to me, and a lot of people share this, is we're going to sign away our future in a panic. So I'm trying to get around and say we shouldn't do it. Go on free trade, price go down in the shops. New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc price goes down, orange juice price goes down.
Our big concerns about a no-deal Brexit would be that we could very suddenly and immediately lose that access to the EU market for British land. And at the moment, we would export about 35% of our UK lamb crop, and 96% of that volume goes into the EU. So a sudden loss of that market would be catastrophic for our industry.
I mean, what are the implications of no deal?
Well, the implications are that route from Calais to Dover is a critical route, so 11,000 trucks coming in every single day with food and drink. But most of our critical dependencies, so if we look at animal medicines, if we look at seeds, if we look at fertilisers, those also come in from the EU. So animal medicines, 90% are made in the EU. Now, we've worked on a just-in-time basis, which has been about bringing in product, taking out product, all tax-free. That is all put at huge risk, bringing those critical things into the marketplace. And also, in a no deal, British farmers are immediately carved out of the marketplace, so they lose their export to the EU market. Indeed, there is no inspection point at Calais, so all the trucks coming into Dover would then, when we regain export access, would have to go back via Zeebrugge or Rotterdam.
I think we are even more worried because we know how many pallets, how many produce we are shipping every day. We're shipping 120 trailers full with produce every day. And a lot of people, I think, in the UK don't understand what's coming in.
In worst case scenario, what does it look like?
Worst case scenario is that there are no inspection facilities for certain goods, for example, live animals. And the other thing is that it's an enormous amount of extra work we have to do. We think about an increase of 30% of import controls and 100% of export controls.
But you're in charge of those inspections. Is it not worrying for you?
Well, if there's no inspection location, I cannot do any inspections. So
it's quite a good example.
That's one truck.
That's one truck of what we as customs clearance agents in Dover and the UK do.
The point is, these types of checks happen for 3% of the trucks that come in and out.
100%.
In a no-deal scenario, you're looking at 100% worth of check
paperwork, yes.
Could you cope with that?
No. We'd like to, and we'd like to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem, but we need help.
But having a no-deal Brexit and stopping on the 29th will be Armageddon for us here. It's not project fear, it will become reality, and that frightens all of us.
In the very worst case scenario, some aircraft will be grounded because those airlines will be unable to operate into European states because they won't have the operating licence. We believe that that won't be across the board, but in worst case scenario, some aircraft may be grounded on the day.
Yeah, I'm worried for both road and air freight shipments. There's a certain amount of administration that's needed to happen to get an import into the country and to get an export out of the country. And at the moment, the skill levels aren't there, the software's not in place, there aren't enough customs experts in our country to handle that. A typical parcel into Milan from this airport for delivery tomorrow could be £25, £30 because there's no customs. You put customs on that, you put VAT and duty, it could be £60, £70.
And so what are you telling your customers?
Prepare for the worst.
In terms of research, we get large sums of money from the European Union. Actually, the UK does very well in terms of research funding from the European Union. But again, it's not just about the money. It's about being part of large collaborative projects.
But the reality is that Manchester University has always been at the forefront of huge scientific developments, from Rutherford to Turing. You've been doing it long before you had European money.
We have. It's a little more difficult now, though. I think the days of the individual researcher are somewhat gone, and of course tackling big global problems now requires large teams of people with very different but complementary expertise.
We're a leader within the biggest science bloc in the world, which is Europe. We are running away from that, and we will suffer as a consequence. The mood music is terrible. In many respects, you could say it's the most important negative thing about this whole business. We are facing a really serious problem. It has to be high on the agenda. I just don't think the public or the government has just got their head around the real calamity that we could be facing.
Well, for example, we could lose access to information about potentially dangerous people who are living abroad, who may have committed serious offences, who are wanted for offences in the UK, or in reverse, you know, the EU will lose access to information about people who are potentially in the UK as well. So there's some very dangerous people that we need to keep tabs of, which is why everyone in the UK and the EU member states want to carry on working together.
And there is real potential for trouble of extremists wanting to exploit the chaos of a possible no-deal Brexit.
Yeah, well, we've seen that time and time again, where there is an issue, no matter what the issue is in Northern Ireland, that people do tend to come onto the streets, that for either a short period of time or a more protracted period of time, that we do see some serious public order and indeed terrorist-related violence as a result of that. So this is purely part of contingency planning that has taken place over the years.
Of course, Brexit is
You know, if it's a hard Brexit, it's a disaster for the UK and Europe at the same time. And you know, if it comes, we will muddle through that somehow. We will help our customers, and you know, it will not as bad as people might think. But it's not good in any case.
Most likely, it would cost more for the UK to trade with the same markets, therefore damaging the competitiveness of UK companies. And here we're talking about preferences on 60% of the country's good trade, and that divides around 47% for the EU and 13% with the non-EU preferential trade partners. And the implication is that the UK exporters would risk having to pay up to £5.6 billion each year on duty on their exports. And there could be an impact on services trade as well.
Whether you're UK or an EU citizen, if you're receiving a payment from the UK into the EU through a pension contract, there's uncertainty over the legality of that. And we need that uncertainty removed so insurers don't have to face choosing between breaking their promise and breaking the law.
We have been as part of this trading bloc for over 50 years, and our whole economy has become incredibly entwined with the European Union. Again, some people think that's a good thing, others may think that's a bad thing. What I think is incontrovertible is untangling that is a very complicated thing to do. No one has actually left a trading bloc like this in the world, and it will take many years to untangle it. And if you were to sever all those ties, actually the consequences would be grave.
What I can say at this point, without disclosing any number, is that clouds on the horizon have not become lighter, but darker. Reaching agreement and closing a deal with the EU will be critical to avoid a no-deal Brexit, which would impose a very large cost on the UK economy.
So I don't want people to start panicking, because that's not the thing to do now. But it does mean that the government has to start thinking about stockpiling, maybe 4 to 6 weeks of supplies in certain cases. And it's certainly the case that NHS organisations must now start to look at their own supply chains. What drugs do they get? Which ones are they very reliant on Europe?
Turning to no deal and no transition Brexit, there are a range of possible outcomes in the event of that, consistent with the FPC's remit, a remit to protect and enhance the resilience of the UK financial system to major shocks. The FPC has focused on 2 variants, labelled disruptive and disorderly, which are underpinned by worst case assumptions. In both scenarios, tariffs and other trade barriers are introduced suddenly next spring. The UK recognises EU product standards, but the EU does not reciprocate. In the more severe or disorderly scenario, the UK's border infrastructure does not cope smoothly with new customs requirements for some time. There's a pronounced increase in the return investors' demand for holding sterling assets. By the end of 2023, GDP is more than 10% lower in the disorderly scenario compared to that May 2016 trend. Despite this sharp contraction in GDP, something that's bigger than happened during the financial crisis, unemployment rises to 7.5%, less than during the financial crisis, and that reflects the supply-driven nature of the downturn.